According to our friends at Top Rank Marketing, 86% of B2B brands consider their influencer marketing successful. And 85% say they plan to increase their investment in influencers over the next 12 months. And yet, these same brands continue to report that their biggest challenges lie in identifying and maintaining relationships with key influencers. They're struggling to find the perfect folks for their programs. And even when they do, all too often, brands don't have the right program and processes in place to keep those influencers happy and engaged. Where are they going wrong? What mistakes are these brands making that the rest of us can learn from and avoid? That's what we're covering in today's episode of Partnership Unpacked. This is Partnership Unpacked, your go-to guide to growing your business through partnerships quickly. I'm your host, Mike Alton, and each episode unpacks the winning strategies and latest trends from influencer marketing to brand partnerships and ideas that you can apply to your own business to grow exponentially. And now, the rest of today's episode. Welcome back to Partnership Unpacked, where I selfishly use this time to pick the brains of experts at strategic partnerships, channel programs, affiliates, influencer marketing, and relationship building. Oh, and you get to learn too. Subscribe to learn how you could amplify your growth strategy with a solid takeaway every episode from partnership experts in the industry. Now, back in episode 6 with Goldie Chan, I mentioned that the idea for talking to her, a B2B influencer, on this show came about due to a conversation I'd had with another influencer. He'd been sharing all these stories of not only the work he'd done with brands, but all the mistakes they'd made in their approaches and their campaigns. And it was clear there were lessons to be learned from talking to these kinds of influencers in this format. So that's exactly what our guest today, my good friend Timothy Hughes, is going to talk to us about. Tim is ranked as the #1 most influential social selling person in the world and is universally recognized as the world-leading pioneer and innovator in this space. He's the co-founder and CEO of DLA Ignite and is co-author of 3 best-selling books. So I knew his incredible experience working with brands and his tremendous business savvy would make him the perfect influencer's voice to bring to the show. Hey, Tim, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mike. It's wonderful to be here. What an amazing introduction. Thank you so much.
It's my
I
pleasure.
didn't know I'd done all those things. I just thought it was just a cycling opportunity.
Right? Well, I didn't actually verify. I trusted you. I trusted the bio. So I'd love to start just by letting you share more about how you got into social selling in the first place and kind of your journey toward becoming the influencer in that space.
Yeah, great question, Mike. My background is sales. I'm a salesperson. I've been in B2B enterprise sales for 25 years. And way back in probably 2013, 2014, I realized something was going on with social media. I didn't know what it was, started playing around with it. And it just so happened that I bumped into somebody, as you do, online, and I ended up getting a book deal, and we had a book deal within 3 months. So Matt and I basically wrote the first book on social selling, which came out in 2016. And then it was pretty much then I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I quit corporate life and I'm in a cushy job in a big software company and set up my own company with my business partner, Adam Gray. And what we do is we help organizations transform to using digital through sales. So that's social selling, but also about how they use digital in the sales method rather than using the analog techniques that we did back in the 1980s and 1990s.
That's fascinating. And if we go back and we think about when you were just starting out in this social selling space, think about the point where you first kind of realized, oh, I'm an influencer. Maybe it didn't come to you that way, but there was a point where you were an influencer. What was your first client gig as an influencer? And kind of talk to us about how that worked.
Well, it all started when I actually first started appearing on lists. So I appeared. I was the number 30th or something like that social selling influencer in the world back in 2014 on a Forbes list. I mean, I was like nobody. And there I am in Forbes on this like top 30 list. And it was like, where did that come from? And then 2015, I at that point I decided I wanted to be number one. So I started working in 2015. I then became number two, and then 2016 I became number one. And actually, one of the reasons why I became number one was when I was number two, everyone said, "Oh, it's really interesting you're number two. So who's number one?" And no one was in. It was like, no one was interested in the fact that but I worked really hard for this. But at that point, I started getting approached by. There was a number of social media listing tools that clearly were listening to what was going on and seeing that I had influence and approached me. And there was one Christmas when I was still working for the corporate company, which was there was a certain amount of tension starting to form at this point. I started getting like, I would do something and then I got like bottles of wine for Christmas, and it was like, and it was like, in those days, this is going back to 2015. So it was just about, there was still a mail room there. It's like, it's the mail room here. What's that? There's a parcel for you. Is that, what is it? We don't know. We don't know. And I would trip into London. People may realize I don't have I have a different accent. And I'd go into London and there'd be like this big parcel and it was like bottles of wine. It was bizarre because I didn't see myself as an influencer. When I wrote my first book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers, the first edition, I kind of thought, well, I actually wrote it because I wanted my dad, who unfortunately has passed away, but at the time, he had dementia and he was just about going into that. And I wanted to basically see him and show him, look, your son actually, he thought he was an idiot and he wasn't going to do anything in his life. He's actually got a book. Suddenly getting all this interest was interesting. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the list because I've been on lists, content marketing lists, and social media blog and so on. And I know often there's a perception that they're popularity contests because often they're not researched and that sort of thing. And yet, clearly, there's value, particularly when it's a list on a publication like Forbes. Like I mentioned in the introduction, we had Goldie Chan on in the previous episode. She's been on lists like that. She's a contributing author to Forbes. So there's prestige on that kind of platform. I'd love to know more about, okay, so once you got to that number one ranking, what happened next?
Well, lists are an interesting thing because there are lists and there's lists, as you're probably aware. There are lists that are created by mates. I remember a guy created a list and the top 7 people were from IBM. And I actually called him out. I said, and I've looked, these people don't have any influence at all. And he DM'd me and said, don't say anything, but I'm going for a job at IBM. And I've created the list. So it's like, and he got the job. So people create lists because they're affiliates or because they're mates. I remember seeing a list that he created of his mates and even put himself on the list, which was kind of, but when you get lists coming out from people like Brand 24, where it's actually a tool that's used for measuring social media influence, that's when I think people sit up. And those lists are what often people are using to check which influencers are what. So there's a number of places, there's Analytica, and Analytica actually have their own portal where I'm on the portal. I was one of the first 15 people in the world to go on there, where you put up your details. There's Thinkers 360, which is another portal I'm on, which is places where you can find influencers. But there's also the lists as well. And again, I think people work through the lists, and it's those lists that generally get me speaker events. And so therefore it's important to be on them. But I'm always interested to see when I'm not on them. Because obviously when I'm not on them, the lists are rubbish.
Right, of course. We all know that, right? And for everyone listening, we already had our first big takeaway from the show, which is that if you want to get hired by a big name brand, publish a list that makes their top executives look great. you'll land that job every
Absolutely,
time.
yeah. Put you to the top 50 influential people at IBM, and then yeah.
There you go. There you go. Just make sure you put the right people at the top of the list, because if you
Yeah,
piss
yeah, yeah,
off the
yeah.
wrong
Otherwise,
guy,
it'd
you're not
be
going to get
career
hired.
limiting.
Yeah. So, Tim, tell me about, and when you're thinking about all the influencer marketing campaigns that you have done in the past, what's been your favorite and what made it your favorite campaign?
My favorite is where the brand came to me and they said it was about working with me. And I will contradict myself, because I actually think that the brand should actually say, we're thinking of doing this, and actually have an idea. Because I have had people pitch to me and said, they just turned up on a Zoom call and said, how much? And the conversation, how much for what? Am I writing a blog, or you could sponsor my next book? And there's all the different things in between, but what are you going to do? And they said, actually, we don't know, which is fine. But what's really good is actually understanding what it is that they're trying to achieve, and how I can add value. So one of the things that often happens is that I think there's an expectation from influencer marketing that it is in effect paid media. And I get a lot of people that come to me and say, what I want you to do, we make glasses cases. And what we want you to do is to go onto the internet and go, this glasses case is the best glasses case that you'll ever buy. And it's just an advert. And if they actually looked at any of my information or read any of my blogs, they'll find that I actually don't believe advertising works, for a start, because I don't believe anybody looks at it. And going out and just being, it's just what people do. Kim Kardashian, it's paid media.
Yeah.
She's paid to wear a pair of shoes, or they basically give her the shoes to wear at the Oscars or something like that. And that's not what people like me are about. There's lots of influencers out there, excellent people. Many of them are my friends, and I know most of influencers, and they're interesting people. They're people that have ethics. They're people that have deep beliefs. They're also people that have deep technical skills or knowledge in particular areas. And what you're doing is that you're hiring, in effect, the expertise. I've now been in social media for 10 years. I've been in social selling this is our 7th year as a company. So I've been there is nobody in the world, and I'm a very modest Brit. There's nobody in the world that knows more about social selling and digitally enabling companies than me. And what they should be doing is tapping into that knowledge and coming to me and saying, this is what we're trying to do. How can we use that? And coming to me and saying, we've got some research, we're not sure what to do with it, would you write the report? That would be fantastic, because you would go on a journey to understand, and that can be a co-creation. Well, we're thinking of this. Oh, yeah, okay, right. And so it's really about looking at the person. And I'm thinking lots of friends I have who are influencers, who are just so amazing at what they do, and tapping into that. And I saw one recently. I won't describe it, because you'll know who it is. But they just wrote a blog about how great a piece of Google software was, and I just thought, and I don't believe that brands will actually get any. Maybe you'll make 1 or 2 sales, because someone will say, Tim says this glasses case is great, so we're going to go out and buy one. But really, I don't believe it.
Yeah, and that's kind of leading into my next question. You've already kind of touched on some of the what not to do, right? But what what is the absolute worst influencer campaign that either you were involved in and then realized at the end this was just rubbish, I shouldn't have done this, or you could just tell from the start, I don't want to have anything to do with this brand or this campaign?
Well, because of the fact that I get approached a lot by people, and a lot of the conversations, I'm happy to listen, and I'm happy to talk to people, because I believe it's important to build network. but I get a lot of people coming to me, and basically, it's what they're asking for is paid media. It's an advert. I remember I was approached by a large software house, and they wanted me to go to their conference, and they actually said to me, "We want you to come to the conference, but we're not sure when you come to the conference what you want to do. So why don't you put in a proposal and say what you're going to do for how much?" So I basically put forward a proposal, and they said, "Yeah, okay, that's brilliant." And really, what it was about going around and interviewing people and saying, "What do you think of the show?" And we made sure that we were, but there was particular people that I wanted to interview. We put those up, and that was fine. And then the person in the organization changed. So the deal that we'd done about this is what this is about a co-creation, and the person changed, and there was a reorganization, and they said, "You haven't written about how great the event was." And I said, "Well, the event wasn't great. It was boring. All you did is pitch your products. Most people slept all the way through it, and the senior US VP couldn't even bother to fly over from the States." And they said, "Well, you still got to write something. How great the show is. How great the show is." Right? It's like, and it was just, just sitting there and writing something. We went to the show, and wasn't it great? Really? Does nobody believes that? I mean, we've been inoculated from, we were inoculated from that way back 20 years ago. Everybody goes to market and says, "Buy my product because we're great." Nobody believes it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why back when we had to watch commercials on TV, we had actors who had to say, they were obligated to say, "I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV," or "I was paid to endorse this product," or
Yeah.
whatever, because unfortunately some people were actually believing that such and such a doctor believed in this drug, or a dentist believed in this toothpaste.
Well, yeah. There's, and with adverts, there's some fantastic adverts in the past where actors basically played parts, which many of us can remember. But the famous, what we know is the fact that they're just actors, and I think most people just go, "Well, yeah, that's interesting," but anyway.
Yeah, and so the key to what you just said is that any kind of influencer marketing campaign, by definition, it's gotta be authentic in order to be successful in
Yes.
actually influencing anybody else. They have to
Well
buy
put.
into whatever it is that's being said.
Yeah, and as I said, there's so many people with so many skills, and tap into it. You don't get them, use those skills.
Yeah, yeah. So we gotta be authentic. Now, if we're thinking about the B2B brand who is, before they even get to the campaign level, right? They're going to have some kind of a program in place for influencer marketing. How would you suggest that they structure that? How should they be approaching influencer marketing kind of at a high level?
Um, so I get approached a lot through marketing agencies. And I was approached just before Christmas for a marketing agency, and it was a massive company, and the massive company was having a product launch January, February of 2023, and the agency came to me with a brief, and the brief was rubbish.
Hmm.
I mean, it was like, this isn't going to get. They said, "Well, can you do this?" And it's like, "Well, yeah, I can do it, but doesn't get you what you want." Now, the problem that I have is the marketing agency actually taking this information and giving it to the actual client? Because it's unlikely that they're going to say, "Well, actually, look, we've actually been giving you bad advice. That this influencer who, actually wants to do something else." Now, I didn't get the work, and I wasn't surprised because, it's like, so there was just so many fundamental things that were that in the advice that was being, or they were coming back and asking me about, saying, they'd given some thought about me actually doing earned media rather than paid media, which was good, but it was like, that's not going to get you, it's and I said, "Is this short term, or do you want SEO? Because if you do that, what you're asking, you don't get any SEO benefit." And if you do, and what we could do is that we could take, rather than just write an article, why don't we come up with a subject matter, like a business process that you're trying to and why don't we take that and do an article, a blog, and a TikTok video, or a video that we can place on other platforms. Now, as I say, I don't, because I'm talking to this third party in this marketing agency. I don't know if that ever was taken through and presented to the client.
Yeah. I've definitely worked and said and taught a very similar tactic where if you're going to work with an influencer, it needs to result in assets that you're going to be able to reuse and repurpose over time. It's got to lead to their strengths, of course. So that could mean a blog or a podcast or a video or a TikTok. But what's the long-term value? What's the purpose? Who are we trying to reach? Those are questions that
Yes.
should be asked.
Yeah, and it wasn't clear. It was a case of, can you produce an article and how much? And it was like, right, okay, what's the objective here?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're launching a product. I can understand that, but if you're launching a product, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're getting the reach in the different places, and there's some fundamentals here within to do with SEO, making sure that we're reaching different platforms that you're missing here. But I don't know. I never got a job.
Well, but okay, so let's think about the jobs that you have had and the successful campaigns that you've worked on, because I'd love to know how, in your experience, you've measured that success. How do we know whether or not we're actually seeing, or how does the brand know if we're seeing ROI from their investment in you as an influencer?
Well, I measure it by paying my mortgage and putting food on the table. So I don't get a salary at the end of the month like people in corporate. So I live my life based on my wits and my expertise, and that's what people are buying. So therefore, for me, it's important, that and for my family, that I earn a living. So that's how I measure it. I think that the way that brands should be measuring it is they need to be reaching, what they're going to be doing is reaching people that they're not talking to at the moment. And that isn't just about visibility, because ultimately what you sell and what I sell requires a conversation. So we need to be building conversations, because conversations create sales. So it's about using, or traditionally organizations are not into and talking to the people that they need to influence, whether that's the companies, whether that's there may be consultants, there may be other influencers that they're trying to reach. And really what you're trying to do is, it's, for me, influencer marketing. Well, you can use influencer marketing down the funnel to reconfirm people's purchases. But for me, influencer marketing usually is a top of funnel activity. And it's about trying to get to people, decision makers, or even middle tier people, to say, have you heard this person? And rather than doing it with me going, hey, have I got this glasses case? And isn't it wonderful? Look, I know that this is which no one's going to listen to. If I do an interview of one of your executives on my podcast, what will happen is that the people that listen to my podcast will come along. Now, the person that I interview isn't going to do a pitch. The person that I interview will be doing what all of my podcast guests are doing, which is sharing a piece of advice and education, just as I'm doing now. But what they're doing is that you're in effect is getting that executive into your target market homes, and so I never thought about them as an organization. That's interesting. That person's got that person's clearly an expert. These people obviously know what they're talking about, and then you've got that visibility. But also, you also need to think about how you're going to take it on and start the conversation. But that's kind of a different conversation for a different day.
We need to be building conversations. That's fantastic advice, Tim, and a perfect segue to this quick message I want to drop in from our CMO at Agorapulse, Daryl Prale, about how brands are missing an opportunity to measure their ROI from another key marketing channel.
It's the Arc de Triomphe. Can you imagine if you're in charge, if you're the CMO of marketing Paris? What are your main channels? Wow, there's the Arc de Triomphe, there's the Eiffel Tower, there's the Louvre. Those are your channels you're going to use to drive tourism dollars in. Okay, now, but you're not the CMO of Paris. In fact, you're the CMO of your company, product, service. So what are your main channels? Well, I'm going to guess there are things like pay-per-click, maybe trade shows, events, maybe content. Those are all pretty predictable, right? Let me ask you this question. Are you treating social media as a main channel? By the way, only 1.8% of you today measure social media and can prove an ROI in that investment. HubSpot and Gartner say social media is the #1 channel to invest in this year. Are you doing it? If not, I can tell you why. You're not doing it because you don't have the tools, you don't have the mentality, and that's okay. We've got you covered. You change the mentality, we'll give you the tools. WordPulse tracks all the ROI for you. One place to manage all your social media activity, your #1 channel. Change your success. Treat social media as a channel, one CMO to another. My name is Daryl. I'm with WordPulse. I'll talk to you soon.
Now, Tim, one question I always like to ask all of my guests, I want to know, how important have relationships been to your success in your career?
Relationships are key. I've just answered a post on LinkedIn where a colleague of mine, basically was talking about someone getting a job, and I tell the story of when I got a job between college and university. I had a long summer and I wanted to do some work, and I got a job as a electrician's mate, and it was a great summer. Drove the van, and also learned loads of things like being able to go up ladders and drill and stuff like that, which are skills that I still use today. And the company was my mum's cousin's company. It's purely from network, purely from the job wasn't advertised, the job wasn't available, and the job I got was purely from within my network. And relationships and network are now critical. And if anyone is going to do anything today, they need to invest in themselves and invest in a network. Look at the number of layoffs that are taking place right now. Where do you think people are finding their jobs? They're finding in the network. It's you have to invest in yourself, and it's to do with relationships. I know we're talking about influence. I know a lot of influencers. I've spent a lot of time connecting with influencers. I mean, you and I can't remember where we've met, but we probably were on a list somewhere.
Yeah.
And one of us probably reached out to us and said, we're on a list. Hey, let's connect. And then it kind of went, and I'm connected to you on Facebook. So I kind of now know what's going on in your life and stuff like that, which is beautiful. And those relationships are so important. It's your asset. It's your gold.
Obviously, couldn't agree more. I have the role that I have at Agorapulse due to relationships that I had, friends that I'd made all those years ago. I'm approaching 5 years now at this company, and
wow,
I was hired because of friendships and relationships. And I also love the fact, Tim, that almost every question you're answering it with a story. I just want to call that out.
Your CMO inspired me to, with his Paris story. I mean, that was beautiful, wasn't it? I mean, I love that.
Daryl's great. I got to tell you, I love working for Daryl.
What a storyteller.
Yeah, he is. And he's got a great natural conversational presence. He makes everyone feel very comfortable, whether they're in person or on video. He's terrific. So I got a question for you, Tim. I would love to know, for the folks in the audience who they don't yet think of themselves as an influencer, but now it's occurring to them, maybe I am, or I could be a B2B influencer. What advice would you have for somebody like that who wants to become a B2B influencer?
Well, we all have influence. If someone says to you, what's that restaurant like? Or have you seen the Avatar film? What's it like? And then you may actually be influencing about whether someone goes to that restaurant or watches the film. So we all have influence. I think that the first thing you have to remember is probably it won't arrive all in one go, though sometimes you look around and, you know, all of a sudden I'm getting these bottles of wine at Christmas, and I don't really know where it's coming from. You know, I had been talking to brands, and actually, it's hard work. So, you know, there may be people that you see suddenly arriving on the scene, but was that saying? You know, it took me 5 years to become an overnight sensation.
Yep, that's right.
And you know, everybody I know, all the influencers I know who are friends, work hard. And I've interviewed a whole load on my podcast. You know, I know, you know, for example, I know the person who's the #1 person for fintech worldwide and has been for years. And I said to him, so how much effort does this take? And he says, you know how much effort it takes. I said, yeah, I do. But I said, I want you to tell me. And he said, I work at this 7 days a week. I'm constantly looking for content to share. I'm constantly looking for people to network with. I'm constantly looking for things that are taking place. Now, I'm a great believer in that every day is a school day. I'm constantly looking for new knowledge. And that for me is probably, if you want to be an influencer, that for me is critical. Now, I'm also an innovator. I have to innovate to stay ahead of the competition. In fact, when we first started, our two main competitors no longer exist. They gave up. We out innovated them. And you know, in a business that you work with, you've got to keep innovating. But that also means that you've got to keep learning. And that's a critical thing for me, is you know, I read 40 books a year.
Wow. I love that you've brought this up, because it's something you actually said at the very beginning of the show when you talked about how you were first listed as an influencer. You weren't #1. You were way down the list, and you made it
I
a
was number
point
30 or something. Yeah.
work hard to get to #2, and then you continue to work hard to get to #1. And you've said it again, and I'm kind of pulling this out and drawing this out because I know a lot of the folks listening are CMOs or other executives in their brand, and they've been thinking about the idea of creating their own personal brand, about being an influencer in their space and helping their brand, which is fantastic. That's why my CMO is out there talking, because it works, it's great, and it requires hard work. You're not going to become an influencer simply because you're the CMO of XYZ brand. You have to exert authority and influence in the industry.
Yeah. It's about exerting that authority, and it's about having digital relevance.
Yeah.
Because what happens in the physical analog world isn't what's being measured. It's what's happening in the digital world, which is what your CMO said. It's about getting that measurement, and that's about having that relevance. And you know, being a thought leader means you need to come up with thoughts, and leading ones at that. Now, all of us stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, there's lots of people that have influenced me and have been mentors. You know, Ted Rubin has been so generous with his time and help with me. He was, you know, he's a classic person who helped me. And part of that is because I showed him, well, I'm hoping that I showed him that I was looking to learn. You know, I didn't come to him and say, I'm an influencer and I know more than you. I went to him and said, I know nothing. You know lots. What can you teach me? And I was sitting down doing my Twitter yesterday, and I was thinking, God, it was Ted that taught me this way back in whenever it was. What a great guy! What a great guy has been to give me those skills. But yeah, it's hard work, but it's and digital relevance.
Yeah. That was the conversation again that I had with Goldie Chan in that previous episode. She was dubbed the Queen of LinkedIn in a Huffington Post article, and that's been kind of her moniker ever since. But that didn't just happen. That didn't just fall in her lap. It's because she'd been creating a video every single day on that platform. She'd put in the work. She'd put in the time to achieve that. And yeah, I love that you bring up Ted, because yeah, it's wonderful to have people like Ted in your lives who are colleagues in the space. I usually refer to this as having a mastermind, where you've got a group of people that, you know, it's not one of those masterminds where there's somebody you're paying to teach everybody. That's not a mastermind. It's when you've got a group of peers and colleagues, and you're able to help each other, support each other, mold each other.
Well, yeah. So when my third book came out, I needed to get the endorsements. I contacted Ted. I said, I need an endorsement. He says, yeah, no problem. He said, what do you need? And it's within, 2 minutes, it's in my inbox. Amazing guy. Really supportive. And that's going back to the network and the relationships. There's that joke, isn't there, about, well, probably can't, the King of England as it is now, which is that, what's the joke about, it used to be about the Queen of England, but, and about influence, which is that, the Queen of England knows, or the King of England knows that they're the King of England. So whenever you go into a room, you don't need to, they're never introduced.
Oh.
So no one ever says this is King Charles III, because everybody knows who it is. And that's what it's like to have influence. When you're going into the room, you don't, that was a point where I remember going to a conference and I went up to somebody and introduced myself. And they said, I know who you are.
Yeah. 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 You reminded me of that exact kind of a thing, earlier when you were talking about how you just suddenly start to realize, oh, I'm kind of well known. Yeah, when I've gone to conferences, because the first few years that I went to conferences, I didn't know anybody and nobody knew me. But now to the point where at least once or twice somebody will come up to me because they recognized me. I don't know who they are. They come up to introduce themselves to me, or I'm introducing myself to them, like you just said. They're like, yeah, Mike, I know who you are.
When Adam and I first set the company up, this was 7 years ago, we went to a conference and we were just sort of like just started and we didn't really know each other. We went to a conference and someone came up to me and went, "You're Tim Hughes, aren't you?" And it was really funny because Adam was going, how did people know you? How does it come that way for you? And I said, I don't know. And it just happens that the person lives down the road from me. But it was really funny. When there's two,
paid them $20 beforehand.
Starting a company, yeah, you'd have gave Matt $20. But it was like we were just starting the company, and this guy comes up with the conference, and Adam was like, "You."
Love it. That's great. I've got just really one more question for you, Tim. And if you're thinking about the channels that you've used over the years, and we could define channel where you want: social media, SEO, relationships, other businesses, past clients, whatever you want to think about. Thinking about the channels that you've had over the years, what has been your best source of influencer marketing work?
Good question. I think the lists are important, but so the thing that really, so I get a lot of people coming to my LinkedIn profile and looking at it. So you need to have the professional edition and above. You don't need to have Sales Navigator, but you need to have the professional edition, where this is where LinkedIn tells you who's looked at your profile. So quite often what happens in an influencer situation is that the intern or somebody within the organization is like, go and get us a list, or tell us, or here's a list, go and have a look at the people. So you get them coming and they look at your LinkedIn profile. Anybody who looks at my LinkedIn profile, if they don't send me a connection request or follow me in some shape or form, I will basically go to them and I will basically just say, you looked at my LinkedIn profile. Is there anything I can do to help you? I'm not trying to pitch and this is about them. It's not, it's about me. And 25% of those turn into, well, actually looking at, we've got a sales kickoff coming up. We're looking at getting speakers. Would you be interested? So from an influencer perspective, that's a way that I've used it, and I will do exactly the same on Twitter. You don't generally find interns on that coming to Twitter to actually to check you out. It will generally be somebody that was, because you can't actually see it, it would be somebody that would be engaging with you in some shape or form. But LinkedIn is the place where I've probably picked up most of the business. Yeah.
What a fantastic piece of advice. I'm so glad I asked questions like that, because you could have just said, yeah, LinkedIn, full stop, right? But then you wove in this fantastic tip, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm on the LinkedIn Gold, I think it's called, or Pro, whatever it is. And yeah, I can see, who's been looking at the profile there, and I've spent a lot of time polishing my profile, which is also advice I give other folks, particularly, again, if you're a CMO listening to this, a CEO, and you're thinking about developing your personal brand, spend some time going back through your LinkedIn profile and make sure that it reads in such a way that would be interesting to other
Not
brands,
to
event
you.
organizers. Yeah.
It's not interesting to you. It's interesting to the person that you're trying to influence.
Yeah.
So I did something. This is another tip. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left. When I wanted to leave corporate world and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I actually thought I was going to be a tech influencer, and I was kind of reaching out and bumping into things, and I didn't know. And I kind of got the book deal, but there seemed to be people making money from doing stuff around tech. Anyway, what I did was that I did a kind of Tony Robbins thing on my LinkedIn profile, and I wrote the LinkedIn profile for the person I wanted to be, not the person that I was. And that was the thing that got me my book deal. It was Matt, my co-author on my first book, found me and went that, and that getting the book deal changed my life. And so that actually changing your profile and doing that, so not writing I'm a CMO, but actually changing it to where you want to be and where you want to go.
What a great way to sum up the whole show. Thank you so much, Tim. This has been fantastic.
Thanks, Mike.
I can't wait. Hopefully we'll be able to get together in person soon in the UK. But for everyone else who's not heading that way, where can they find you, connect with you if they want to learn more?
The best place to get me is LinkedIn. I'm Timothy or Tim Hughes. Or you can find me on Twitter. I'm Timothy_Hughes. My website is dlaignite.com. And I must say that I do have a book for sale, which is on Amazon worldwide, which is with the yellow cover, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers, 2nd edition.
Fantastic, folks. We'll have all those links, the books, everything in the notes. You can just scroll down at this point. And that's all we've got for today, friends. I hope you're enjoying these insider perspectives, because I've got some more tremendous influencers lined up to share their secrets for you in the future. Meanwhile, our next episode is going to dive into the state of partner ops, a report that was co-authored by HubSpot and partnership leaders, with Kelly and Asher joining me to walk through it. So don't forget to subscribe to the Partnership Unpacked podcast and drop us a review. We'd love to know what you think. Until next time.